being here. We have a very large group today, and you know, it's an important topic. And so I know that many of you are here today because in some way you're struggling with getting your employees' utilization up to where you want it to be, to your target numbers. And as Leanne mentioned, small increases in utilization are a lot of money. So we're going to really dig into that today. And I hope, my goal is at the end of today, or end of this session, you're going to have some really good ideas about what you can do next to improve your company's utilization. So I'm just going to share my PowerPoint here. And let's get started. So I like to set goals for every training that I do. And so the first thing I want to get across is really looking at the impact of your company on utilization. How does it impact your profitability? And hopefully you all know those numbers. If you don't know those numbers, you'll be able to calculate those numbers by the end of this session. And I notice some of you, I actually always go in and look at who I'm talking to when I do a training session. And some of you are leaders of a firm, some of you are CFOs, some of you are business unit leaders. And business unit leaders may be responsible for the utilization metrics for just your own group. And so I think it's important to know your numbers as well. So you may kind of be aware of what your company's numbers are, but not your unit numbers. Or in some cases, you might be familiar with your unit's numbers and not your overall company numbers. I recommend that you learn all of those numbers. I'm going to be going through 10 areas that you can start to look at to impact your utilization, and try to get into each one a little bit and talk about how and why you might be able to impact that. As Leanne mentioned, you're going to have a worksheet. Hopefully you've had a chance to print it out. If you don't worry. Have a piece of paper down. The key to this is that you're going to be assessing your own company to look at what's going on there. And hopefully that will give you a tool to take back, to have conversations with others in your organization about areas that you believe may need to be revisited or analyzed or worked on. And then at the end, we'll talk about what you might want to do as the next step. And I'm going to want you to think about that, okay? Because it's great coming to a webinar or a training class and learning a few things, but if you don't do anything with what you learn, then it's kind of a waste of time. And we want you to move forward increasing your utilization. So the first thing that I want you to think about, utilization directly affects profit. And so what I want you to think about is if you had 1 to 5% more profit in your firm, what would that mean? What would you do with that extra profit? What would it mean to your company as a whole and the owners of your company? What would it mean to your employees? Because hopefully if you make more money, you're going to share some of the wealth with your staff. And even what would it mean to your clients? Does it mean you can deliver better service? That you can hire more people, that you can expand your offer, whatever that looks like. I want you to kind of write that down. And the reason is, when we get to the end of your worksheet today, and there's a place on the top of your worksheet for you to write that down. When you get to the end of your worksheet and you're thinking about your next steps, there may be others in your organization that you need to get on board. And in order to get them on board, you really need to talk about the why behind why you're doing what you're doing. Just talking about having more money doesn't always get people excited, but when you talk about the benefits of having that money, we can give bigger bonuses to our staff. We can open a new office or expand our services or whatever it is that you believe is beneficial to your company. Having that written down as a discussion point with your leaders of your firm is very, very helpful in helping you move forward in getting things done. So hopefully you know what those are. So the first thing, I'm going to get into some numbers here. I promise you there's not too many numbers that we're going to talk about, but we need to talk about numbers a little bit. How do you calculate utilization? Now, I will tell you that everybody does it a little different. The way I'm showing you is kind of the standard, normal way that I've seen it done. This is the simple way to calculate utilization. You may have a little bit different formula in your company, and that is perfectly fine. The key is that you're consistent, right? So you don't want to calculate it one way for one group of people in your company and in a different calculation method for other people in your company. You want to do it the same for everybody. So the simple way is you just take the hours that were charged to projects and you divide it by all the hours that were available to be worked during a standard work week for your employees, and that gives you a rate, right? And this is calculating it based on hours. You can also do it based on dollars, and you're going to get a totally different answer if you base it on dollars. I actually recommend you do both of them. Normally when you see utilization quoted across the A&E industry, you see a percentage sign. So normally you see a rate. And that is the easiest way to monitor your employees and show a reporting to your staff. And so you need to have it by percentage, but having it by dollars can also give you some additional insights. Now, some of you may not use standard hours, you might use total hours. Total hours are all the hours worked by your employees, including unpaid overtime. That's fine. You've got to realize you're going to have a different rate for that. If all of those extra hours that people work were working on proposals, you're going to end up having a much lower utilization rate. If all of those extra hours that people worked were billable, you're going to have a higher utilization rate. So it could mean different things if you use total hours. Standard hours is a standard 2,080 hours in a year. Some of you might subtract PTO or paid time off out of that. That's fine. As I said, you can do this any way you want. I'm doing it the really simple way. If you just have an example in a given month for a given one employee, if they worked 101 billable hours out of 168 standard hours, that's a 60% utilization rate. So that's a simple way of doing it. And then you can take that across business units, across teams, across your entire firm, including your administrative and non-billable staff, and you can do that math for everybody and look at those numbers a lot of different ways. So I recommend that you do that. You look at it, you slice it, you dice it. And then again, you can do it by dollars based on billing rates and things like that. So that's just your basic calculation. All of you should be able to go back to whatever system you use and get this information out pretty easily. This should be a fairly straightforward number for you to get out. If you cannot get that out of your system, that may be one of the things that you need to deal with when we're looking at utilization. So then what I really, the main reason for showing you that calculation is to really help you understand the impact of small changes in utilization. So if we have a 100-employee firm, and that's kind of a standard size firm in the A&E industry, it isn't small firm. It isn't a really large firm. It's kind of an average normal firm is 100 employees. If you're much smaller than that, you can do the math that way. If you're much larger than that, you can do the math. These numbers work out. The reason I pick 100 is an easy number to use because it's divisible by 10. So if your standard hours would be 100 employees times 2,080 is 208,000 standard hours in a year. In one whole year, 100 of your employees, if they worked every hour billable, they would have a 208,000 billable hours. Now, if their direct hours were 124,800, that would be a 60% utilization. If they work 126,880, that would be a 61% utilization. So if you take that 1% increase in utilization times an average billing rate, so you get those extra 2,080 hours times an average billing rate, then you can start to see the dollar value. Is in this case, we use 2,080, it's $208,000. Simple math, right? That's a lot of money. Most 100-person firms would love to have an extra $200,000 in the bank. And it's money that you lose every single day if your employees are not highly utilized. That is a really, really important thing for you all to think about and to take home with you. If you wait 3 months from now, if you're a 100-person firm and you wait 3 months from now to deal with this issue, you have lost $50,000 or $52,000. That's a lot of money. And so I really urge you to really focus in on those small increases. Many firms can increase their utilization way more than 1%. It could be 2 or 3 or 4%. Just think about that. 5% increase is $1 million if you're a 100-person firm. And that is really a lot of money for a 100-person firm. Now, the other thing that I want to point out here, if you look at these numbers, it's really only 0.42 hours a week, which is about, I think it's around 24 minutes. So that means if you can get your employees 24 minutes more billable in a week, in 1 week, then you can get that $200,000. So this is definitely worth your time. This is one of the bigger metrics. When I'm looking at clients that we work with and I'm looking at their metrics, this is one of the big ones. When I work with firms that are 500, 600, 700 employees, that number is usually in the millions of dollars for 1% increase. It's huge. So think about it. Know your numbers, calculate your numbers, go back and work on your numbers. And so hopefully this has been helpful to give you some perspective on that. Now, I like to ask this question. I even wrote a blog post, you know, how can our utilization be low if everyone's busy? And I'll tell you, even during the recession, when we all did not have enough work, everyone was busy. Well, what does that mean, busy? People are running around crazy all the time. And if you ask any individual on any given day, even if they don't have projects to work with, they will tell you they are busy. I've almost never heard somebody say they're not busy. So you have to think about that. If everyone's always busy, what are they doing? Why are they busy? And are they really using their time in the most productive way to make the company the most money? And that's really what we're going to be drilling down on today. Are they really productive or are they just busy? And so we're going to be really taking a look at that. And I kind of, a little challenge to you is to walk around your office and ask people, are you busy? Are you busy? And then go back and look at their utilization. And you can see that people vary so much between being busy and being utilized. It's really a big difference. Now, the purpose of having high utilization, if you think about it, you have these employees, you've hired them because you need them to work on projects, by and large. You also have administrative staff that are sending out proposals or managing human resources, or you might have some firm leaders that are mostly administrative in nature. Maybe they're doing client relationships or other kinds of marketing and business development. But your employees, your technical staff, the ones that you've hired to work on projects, you don't want them sitting around with no work to do. But in reality, it's very, very hard to schedule your staff so that they're busy all the time, right? So some weeks they may be super busy, and other weeks they don't have as much work to do. And so the real goal of your scheduling process, of your resource management, and managing this utilization issue is, how do you even that out more? How do you keep people utilized and busy on a more steady basis? So it's not like a roller coaster ride where they're either too busy or not busy enough. So we want to try to even that out, right? And that's the challenge here. That's the hard part. We don't want them sitting around with no work to do. We also, in truth, don't want them so frazzled and busy that they're really not able to do the best job possible, because that's going to affect the quality and their performance and all of that. So we want to get this right, and it's not easy to do. And so hopefully I'm going to give you the real steps that you need to take. So, you know, in thinking through what causes you low utilization, these are the main factors that I've listed here on the screen. First of all, poor or inaccurate time management. And this really goes to two things. It goes to the time management of your staff in terms of how they use their time. You know, are they wasting time? But it also really goes back to their time sheets and how well they are actually putting their time on their time sheets, tracking their time, tracking what they do. So that's the first point that we're going to elaborate on. Maybe they have a bit of a lack of direction and focus, especially on their non-billable time. So if they are going to be 60% utilized or even 70% utilized, what are they doing with the rest of that time? Now, some of it's going to be paid time off. They may be working on proposals. They may be doing other things. So we're going to talk about that some more. How do we maximize the use of the non-billable time so it still helps you bring more profit in the door? Maybe you don't have a very good scheduling process. And this is really important. I have worked with some very, very large firms, and I couldn't believe the lack of scheduling process that they had. It was really left much up to the unit leaders, the team leaders, who were all basically doing it their own way. Some of them had spreadsheets, some of them had pieces of paper, some of them had some software they were using. It was very inconsistent. And so if there's inconsistency in your organization, then you don't have a process, or you may have one that nobody is using. Maybe it's your inability to forecast. So being able to look into the future and see what needs your company is going to have for people. Do you have enough work to keep everyone busy? Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you have too much work and you're going to need to hire people. And that's been a big challenge for a lot of companies recently, is that they don't have enough people, but because they can't forecast, it's been very difficult. And so that's where you end up with these craziness of your employees, some employees working too much and other employees not having enough work to do. Maybe there's some poor communication going on. So if your employees don't know what they're supposed to be spending their time doing, it's very hard for them to maximize their utilization. So we're going to talk about some tips for that. Maybe they're not, your supervisors and your project managers are not scrutinizing what's going on, what people are working on, making sure that, maybe there's just not enough scrutiny overall on what people are doing, as well as really looking at what they're putting on their timesheet so that we know that it's correct, and looking at it and saying, well, why are you doing that? Those type of things. Because again, you don't want to have write-offs either, because write-offs ultimately are going to affect your billing and your profit and potentially your utilization if you're writing off the time against your utilization. And then finally, we have the issue of not having enough work to do. Now, I will tell you, the majority of clients that I'm working with these days have too much work. And that could be a problem in itself, but not enough work has not been a huge problem. But on any given day or month, even though your firm has a ton of backlog, a given employee may not have enough work. And so that is a different problem that you have to be able to solve. And being able to get the right people in the right seats and making sure that you have everybody scheduled appropriately. So this is what we're going to be looking at, how to solve these problems. And I hope that is going to be very helpful for you today. So now we're going to look at the 10 keys that I'm going to talk about to increase your utilization. Get your worksheet out. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to score your firm on how well you manage each of these 10 keys. If you feel that your firm is, it's a disaster and there's really nothing in place going on, give yourself a 1. If you think you're knocking it out of the park and there's nothing you could be doing better in that area, give yourself a 10. I actually find most firms fall in the middle, maybe low on some areas, higher on some areas. That's normal. The one thing I will tell you, I don't want you to feel bad about giving your company a low score, because what that means is now you have something you can go work on that's going to increase your utilization and your profits, which is a good thing. And there may be quite a bit of money being left on the table. And now you have the opportunity to identify that and go work on it and get that money back. So do me a favor, don't race through this worksheet ahead of schedule. Let's talk about it a little bit before you give your company a score. And by the way, you know, if you want to put anything in the chat about a specific challenge that you have in each of those areas that you really want me to address, let me know. I'd be happy to talk about those areas with you. Oops. Oh, okay, sorry, I just messed that up. So let's get into the 10 keys. First of all, time management. Really what this has to do with, what this really has to do with is how your employees spending their time and how they're recording their time. If your employees are not given a lot of direction, they're not going to be managing their time very well. If they're not given a lot of direction about how to fill out their timesheets, then they're really not going to do a great job of managing their time, because ultimately, even if they do a great job of managing their time, but they don't record it correctly on their timesheet, that is going to affect your utilization, your billing, your project performance reporting. Pretty much everything that goes on in your company is affected by your timesheets and how you track your time. Now, I will tell you, the number one thing that you can do to improve time management and time recording of timesheets is to require your employees to enter their time every single day into their electronic timesheet program. And hopefully that's what you're already doing. It's always amazing to me that most firms struggle with this. Even if they've made that a policy, they seem to have a very difficult time getting people to do it. And that really just comes down to accountability. And that's something that I work with our clients a lot, because it's critical. This is a critical function to your business. All of your employees really need to know why it's so important. And they need to be given very detailed and instructions, how to fill out their timesheet, how to manage their time, how to record extra services, how to do all of those things that are going to help you to be higher utilized. If you don't have daily timesheets and you don't have detailed documented timesheet policies, then I don't want you to give yourself a 10, because that is what you're going to need to go back and work on. So think about what's going on in your firm right now and how well time overall is managed, and how well your employees are doing it, filling out their timesheets accurately and filling them out on time, preferably on a daily basis, and that your company has very good guidelines that you give your employees, and they should be in writing, for filling out timesheets and for onboarding new people. So go ahead and give your company a score 1 to 10 on your time management practices. All right. Next is how you manage non-billable time. Now, as Leanne mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned, and for those of you who know me or read my book, you know that I am all about profit. If your utilization is low, that means your overhead is high. If your overhead is higher than what your company is targeting or estimating in your budgets or in your billing rates, then you can even actually be losing money on every hour that your employee works, especially if you have time and materials projects. Because if your overhead is too high, you didn't build in that much overhead into your billing rates. That's going to affect, that's really going to affect your profit. Non-billable time is the time that your employees are spending outside of projects working on all kinds of things. It could be admin time, could be marketing, business development, or sales, client relationship type stuff. It could be attending company meetings. It could be training. There's lots of things that people do that are not billable within your firm. And if your utilization rate is about 60, let's say it's 65%, that means 35% of the time your employees are spending are non-billable. So the question I want to ask you is, are you getting the value for that overhead time? Are you at least, if they are spending 35, 40% of their time doing non-billable tasks, assignments, is that very well organized? Do they know what they're supposed to be spending their non-billable time doing? Is it budgeted? Do you have a way to break it down on your timesheet? Do you have a way of analyzing it? Are you holding people accountable for their non-billable time? They should be held accountable just as much for their non-billable time as their billable time, because it's still costing the company the same amount of money. And it's actually costing you a lot more money because you're not getting reimbursed from your client. So non-billable time is crucial, making sure that every person who's doing tasks or assignments that are not chargeable to your clients or projects, that you are maximizing the value that your company gets from your employees' non-billable time. So I want you to give your company a score of 1 to 10 on how well you budget, manage, scrutinize, analyze, and prioritize what people are doing when they're not able to be billable. And you may say to yourself, well, this isn't going to help me increase utilization. No, it may not. It might actually, because they're going to maybe think a little bit more before they start working on something that's not billable. But overall, it's going to help you increase your profits. So this is an important item when it comes to this overall subject about what your employees do with their time. So go ahead and give your company a score 1 to 10 on how well this is managed. So number 3, bottom-up budgeting. The reason this is so important is that in order to have a great scheduling process, and we're going to talk about scheduling processes in a few minutes, but in order to have a decent scheduling process, you have to plan your projects. You have to plan out every project in terms of what is going to be required, how many hours it should take, and when it's going to happen. If you're not doing this, then it's almost impossible to optimally schedule your staff. You're not going to have visibility into what they're supposed to be doing every week. You're not going to be able to communicate with them what they're supposed to be doing because you don't have it thought through very well. And many companies, and one of the things I teach in our Find the Lost Dollars program is that you have to plan your projects out in detail and manage them and monitor them. And many firms do what's called top-down budgeting, meaning they say, okay, this project is $50,000. We think it's this many hours. We're just going to divide that and break that up somehow. It's done really roughly. And by doing that, you're not really giving yourself an advantage as to being able to really see where you're spending your money, whether you're going over on hours on certain phases or tasks of your project, and really upfront giving your employees the communication about what they should be doing and how many hours it should take them each week to do their jobs. And many of your employees may be working on many, many projects, which makes it even harder to give them proper instructions. So bottom-up budgeting of your projects will enable you, when you pull all those projects together, to be able to see much better what people should be doing and whether there's any potential shortfalls each week in either certain employees or over across the board. Maybe you don't have enough work overall that week. So give your company a score, 1 to 10, on how well you do bottom-up budgeting of your projects. Okay, next, number 4, employee targets. So this is really about engaging your employees to help you control utilization. Your employees are managing their own time every week. They need clear instructions as to what the expectations are. So you should have individual employee targets for each of your people, and there should be an easy way for them to see whether they're on target or not. And then there should be an expectation for your employees about how to hold themselves accountable for hitting their targets. And we're going to talk about in a few minutes about the downside of this, because I know what many of you are thinking. Well, if we just tell everyone to go be billable, they will be billable. And you are absolutely right. And that's why doing this has to be done in the context of all of these things together. If you just tell people to be billable, they will be billable, right? They're going to charge their time on the timesheet to all kinds of junk and projects that are closed and fixed fee projects that are just going to go way over budget. So you can't do that. You have to have this in the context of project profitability, of scrutiny, and other things that we're going to be talking about. So the main concept here is there a clear metric for each employee? Do they know what it is? And are they getting clear feedback, whether it's in a system or a report or a dashboard or something, where they can see whether they're on track with their own individual targets? And then, what discussions are going on about that as well? Are managers talking to employees about it? Do they know what they're supposed to be doing? So give your company a score, 1 to 10, on employee targets. Are your employees managing themselves? All right, next we have scheduling process. So the scheduling process is about managing who you have available, the projects that are going on each week, and the work that needs to get done each week with deliverables and all of that. Being realistic with the number of hours that a human being can work in a day. And the scheduling process should be documented. It should be consistent across teams and groups in your organization. And it should be followed, right? So a process is useless if you put it out there and nobody uses it, right? If your people decide they're going to create their own spreadsheets or use other systems. I recently was working with a firm, and we were going through some training that we do around resource management, and we discovered that pretty much every group in their company had their own way of doing it. This is a pretty large firm. And, that's having that kind of inconsistency across your organization is going to yield a lot of different results. Some might be good and some might not be good. And so you really have to dig down, look at your teams, look at the processes they're following, understand who's doing it well and who isn't. My belief is when you develop a process, the process should be based around this is the best way to do it. And if you truly have figured out the best way to do it, then there's no reason that everyone in your company shouldn't be doing it. If they're not, then they're not doing it the best way, right? So I want you to think about that. Give your company a score, 1 to 10, on your process. It's documented. Everybody knows how to use it. They're trained on it. They are following it. And it is working, right? And if it's not working, then you don't have a good process. What I see sometimes in some firms is, you know, they have these Monday morning meetings and everybody is running around trying to find work for certain people that have no work. And that's terrible. I mean, that is not going to yield you the best results. It's not the most efficient use of people's time. So really think about what's going on in your company. Give your company a score 1 to 10. And don't feel bad after these 5 keys so far. We're halfway through. If you don't have a lot of 10s or 9s or even 8s, that's okay. There's a lot of money to find. Hopefully you're starting to get some ideas and jot down some ideas about where you're going to go start to find this money. So let's cover the next 5 items. Number 6 is communication. On any given day, do your employees know exactly what they're supposed to be doing? Do they know each task, how many hours it's supposed to take? One of the things that surprises me is that this is not happening very well in most companies. When I come in and do our business management assessment, I often discover that this is one of the #1 problems that many companies have. And there's a lot of reasons for it. People are really busy. Project managers often make assumptions that their staff know what to do or how long it should take. Maybe there's not a good system in place to help automate this process. There's a whole lot of reasons that this happens. But the more that you can improve this communication in your between PMs and when they're giving instructions to the staff, how well your staff are trained to ask questions. There's a whole lot of areas that you can work on the communication area. Sometimes it's even starts with the kickoff meeting and it goes all the way through the project. So I want you to think about what's going on now in your firm with communication and how you might be able to improve it. So go ahead and give your company a score of 1 to 10 on the communication that's going on. Now let me just say, if you don't know the answer to this, you might have to guess, because very often this is one of those things that's a little bit hard to figure out, and you have to do a lot more digging. You have to assess at a much deeper level what's going on in order to really discover what the communication gaps are with your teams. So go ahead and give your company a score 1 to 10. The next area is automation. Automation technology systems can really, really support your utilization efforts, being able to manage people, being able to see on a screen who's going to be overutilized or underutilized, whether people are hitting their targets. All of these things can be improved dramatically by automation. Now, one of the things I hear all the time is, oh, well, we tried to automate this, but it was too cumbersome. You know what? It may have seemed too cumbersome, but what you're doing now is probably more cumbersome. It just feels easier to you because the system isn't familiar, or you haven't gotten really good at it. But once you get really good at it, or you have administrative staff that can help you get really good at it, you're going to find that it's going to actually save a lot of time, and it's going to help you be more effective. Because the goal here is to get your utilization up. The goal is to get more people working more billable hours. So you need computers these days to do that, especially if you have more than 10 people. It's really hard to make sure that you have everybody working on the right thing at the right time and the right number of hours. And being able to see that, automation gives you so much better visibility. So give your company a score 1 to 10 on how well automated your scheduling and resource management processes are. All right, so key number 8 is reporting. And reporting is giving you the ability to analyze your information. Now, I'm guessing, if I'm going to guess across these 10 keys, that the majority of you are going to have a higher score on this one, which is great. If you are getting all the reports you need about your company's utilization, then you can give yourself a 10. However, what I find is that many companies don't have it broken down and be able to slice and dice the utilization reporting at the levels that you need to. So here's what was available this week for people to be working. Here's what we budgeted. Here's what we scheduled. And here's what they actually worked. You may or may not be able to get that kind of reporting. Just being able to see whether people are hitting their targets or not, whether divisions or business units are hitting their targets, and then your company as a whole is very, very valuable and should be really shared across the organization as much as possible, because it really does help keep people focused on those numbers. So go ahead and give your company a score of 1 to 10 on reporting. A 10 would mean that you're getting all the reports and they're easy to get. You're not doing them all manually in a spreadsheet. You are doing them manually in a spreadsheet. I would not consider that a 10, because theoretically it should be able to be automated much, much better, and you should be able to get it much more quickly with less human intervention. So go ahead and give your company a score of 1 to 10 on reporting. Okay, number 9 is accountability. What is accountability? Accountability is all of your employees have goals. They know what those goals are. They know what the consequences are for not hitting those goals. They could be incentives and rewards. I'm a big believer in positive accountability. Positive accountability means that everyone is working together to be accountable. They understand their role in helping the company succeed. Accountability is not punishment. It's not, getting in trouble or I screwed up. Accountability is, hey, everybody, let's all be motivated in working towards the same goals and share in the rewards that are going to be provided by all of us working together to have an accountable culture in our company. So it's accountability around timesheets. It's accountability around owning what you're doing with your time, how you fill your timesheet out. If you don't have enough work to do you know where to go and who to ask about what you should be doing with your non-billable time, or just letting your managers or your supervisors know that you don't have enough work to do? Is that an expectation in your firm that all of your employees are going to hold themselves accountable? Is there accountability for your project managers for making sure their teams are fully utilized, for reviewing timesheets on a regular basis, and scheduling people appropriately, and using the systems that your company has invested in to ensure that you can keep people utilized? So this is what accountability is all about. So I want you to think about what's really going on in your firm right now and give your company a true score on accountability. Is this something that happens easily within your organization? Or is this something that you're struggling with and maybe need more help with improving that accountability throughout your company so that it's not a dirty word, it's not something that's difficult or hard to do, it's something expected and normal and positive, right? Because if everybody is responsible and does what they're supposed to do, we're going to make a lot more money and we're all going to share in those rewards. So if that sounds really unfamiliar, what I'm saying to you, then maybe you might have a lower score on this area. And I know for some firms, this is their biggest challenge, right? I hear that a lot from many companies. I hear it from individual managers and leaders. They say to me, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at holding people accountable. I avoid conflict. And I don't think it always has to be framed as conflict. There's a lot better ways of communicating expectations, and holding people accountable that isn't a negative thing. So go ahead and give your company a score 1 to 10 on accountability. If you have a lower score in this area, that might be something that would be really valuable to go back and think about and talk about with your leadership team. So we finally get to key number 10, and key number 10 is focus on profits. The reason that a lot of projects go over budget, which means when a project goes over budget, in many cases you cannot bill for the time that's being charged on the timesheet, right? So people are charging their time, they're spending too many hours doing things. Your ultimate goal with managing your resources is that people not only are going to be billable, but they're also you're gonna have high realization, meaning that you can charge your clients for their time. If your projects are consistently going over budget, then people are actually spending their time doing things that aren't valuable for the company. So key number 10 is more of a high level cultural thing that I work with companies on every day, and that is how we get our employees focused on the big picture here. That it isn't just about recording something on your timesheet. It isn't just about making sure you always have enough work to do or that you look like you're busy. It's ultimately about, are we maximizing our profitability in the firm so that we can grow, so we can reward our employees, so we can be a successful company to work at. And so focusing on profits is really a deep cultural thing in your company. If all you're talking about with your employees every day is quality, keeping the client happy, getting the job done, and all of those other important and very important values that you have as a company, and those are all important things, and you do need to be talking about them, but they have to be balanced with financial success, because ultimately it is a business. And if the business doesn't make a profit, then the company is ultimately not successful. Even if you deliver the best projects in the world, at the end of the day, if you don't have any profit, you're going to be out of business and you can't continue to deliver those wonderful projects. So focusing on profits is a cultural thing. It's how you communicate with your staff every day. It's what you talk about. It's how the training that you give people. It's all about understanding how a business operates and how a business makes money. And ultimately, your employees are not going to perform at their top level, and they're not going to be as highly utilized and successful as you want them to be unless, sorry about that, unless you make a profit. So give your company a score 1 to 10 on the level, how well your culture embraces profitability as being a key component of what you do, and how you manage projects and how you manage people, and just what are people spending their time talking about every day? What do you talk about in your meetings, in your staff meetings? Do you spend a lot of time going over financial information with people and showing them reports and being transparent and setting expectations about profitability? All of that is, part of that is behavior, but part of it is culture. It's what your employees perceive as being what the company considers to be valuable. So each of you give your company a score, 1 to 10, on how well you're focused on profits. So the next thing that we're going to do is add up our scores. Probably most of you, if you are engineers, you've probably already done that. That's what I find. The engineers race ahead. and they've already added up their scores. So go ahead, add up your scores and write down your total score. And then we're going to talk about what it means. What do these scores mean? Well, first of all, hopefully, looking at each of the 10 areas, it's already given you some clues about some things you might want to work on. So I really hope so. I really hope that's what you're getting out of this. The second thing is to figure out what are you going to do about it, right? Because if you're not a 10 in every area, there is a lot of money to find. I promise you. And I created this scoring for you. If you're 10 to 25, I can promise you, you should be able to increase your profits at least 5% or your utilization, at least 5% or more. And if you've done the numbers, you know what that number is. 26 to 50, there's still a lot of money at stake here. You're probably losing quite a bit of money. 51 to 75, the average firm falls into this category. When I do this exercise with most companies, this is where most companies fall into. I would call this mediocre or average. It's not horrible, but it's not great. 76 to 90 is pretty good. You're probably doing a lot of these things. You're doing them pretty well. If you're on the upper end of that scale towards 90, you're doing really, really well. You're way ahead of the average firm. If you're on the bottom level, there's 76. I think there's still 24% improvement that you could make. So that's still a lot. And if you're in the 91 to 100, first of all, if you're in the 91 to 100, I'd love to hear from you. I call this a gold star company. And in all the years I've been working with A&E firms, I've run across very few that are in the 91 to 100. No matter what, whether we're talking about project management or utilization or a lot of other things, firm management, sales and marketing, generally speaking, there are very few firms that are in that 91 to 100. And what that shows you is there's room for improvement and there's a lot of money to find. And so that's why it's so important. That's why on the bottom of this worksheet, I've put a place for you to write down, what did you learn from this webinar? What are 3 things that you could do right now that you learned that you could go back and work on? And then what is the number 1 thing you're going to do next? Are you going to take this worksheet and go sit down with some other people in your company and talk about it? For some of you that have multiple people on today from the same company, that would be a good next step. Sit down and talk about it. Get together after this webinar and compare notes. Get your worksheets out, compare notes, talk about it. Maybe the next step is you want to have a conversation with me, and that may make sense for you. If you need help figuring out what to do next or how to address some of these issues. Some of these are big things. Some of them are smaller things, but some of them are pretty big things. So I want you to fill the rest of your worksheet out, write down those 3 things, write down 1 thing you're going to do next. Oops, wrong button. And finally, I'm leaving a few minutes here at the end to answer any questions. If you need help, most of you are on here today because you have an issue with utilization. And I'm guessing that the majority of you, your scores are in the 30 to 60% or 70% range on your worksheet. And so there are different ways of approaching that. You can try to take care of it all yourself, but some of you may need some help doing that because we don't always know where to start or what the best way of doing something is. So what I've done is I've set aside some time to help companies increase profits. And I call it a profit analysis. Basically what we do is we look at the 3 biggest areas where profits are leaking out of your projects. Why are your projects leaking profits? And we can talk just about this worksheet if you want, or there may be some other areas that you identified, even thinking about what we've been talking about today. There may be some other things that are jumping out for you. the next thing is I want to sit down with you and figure out the financial impact that's having on your company. So we're going to run some numbers. We're going to talk about it. Because if you don't know those numbers, it's very hard to move forward with anybody, to get anybody in your company to commit to anything. You really need to know your numbers. And then my goal is, this is normally like a 30-minute call. At the end of the 30 minutes, you will be much clearer about what you need to do next. And, you know, it may be that there's an area there that I can help you with, maybe not, right? It might be something else that needs to happen for you. You may go back and decide you want to try to tackle it yourself. That's fine. You might decide that you want to learn more about how we can help you. That's great if it makes sense, if it's a good fit. So if you're interested in having a conversation, please jump on this, go to this link, and Leanne's going to be sending you a copy of the recorded webinar and the slides from today, and this link in an email sometime later on. And at that point, go ahead and feel free to, you can do it now if you want to reach out and schedule a time to talk, or you can wait till you get that email. It's great to have that recording if you want to go through it again, if you want to share it with other people in your company. You can even get a group together and sit down in do a lunch and learn and talk about it further. And so I want to open up to see if there's any questions. I don't know why this, okay. So there's one question, it's kind of, there's some really long ones here. What is a typical utilization rate for an interior design firm of about 25 people? Honestly, I don't know that. I would recommend going out to, you know, Y Group or one of those companies that has a financial performance survey and getting that information. I know in the industry it averages around 60 to 65%. But I still think that doesn't mean that you can't get much higher. And so really the best way to do it is to look at who do we have on our staff, how many projects do we have that we have backlogged for, what opportunities are coming in the door, and what is a realistic billable target? You know, what should you be? Where should that utilization be? And that's really what's most important. And if you're hitting up the higher profit margins that you want, you're over 15% profit, then you know you're doing fine. But if your profit is lower, then I would assume your utilization could be higher. And so maybe that should be, your targets aren't high enough. So that's just my thoughts on that. Carolyn wrote, it's like pulling teeth to get people to review timesheets. What are some tips to making that happen? Yeah, you know, I do a whole training session on time management, timesheets. The only thing I can say is you got to try a lot of different things, but try the carrot and the stick, right? Give them an incentive to do their timesheet and a consequence. And you have to try some different things until you figure out what might get them to do their timesheets. But ultimately, it comes down to accountability, right? Are there any consequences or for them? And if not, they're not going to do it. So there has to be something that makes them want to do it. And Carolyn also commented, a high overhead rate means a firm is less competitive on direct rate government contracts. That's absolutely true. Having the higher utilization is really important, and getting it up there. And Carolyn, you had a lot of other great comments. I'm not going to read all of those off, but I'm happy to talk with you further if you'd like to do that. And for any of you who are questioning what's going on in your firm and whether your numbers make sense or how much you think we could increase utilization by, what your targets should really be, I'm happy to have a conversation with you and see what you're doing now and see if it makes sense. And maybe hopefully give you some ideas about what you would really want to focus on first to get those numbers in your worksheet higher up. Because ultimately, in a year from now, if you are working on these things, your utilization should be higher, and the scores that you give your company on this worksheet should be much higher. So that's how you're going to know. This is a benchmark for you to know, where are you right now, where do you want to be, how are you going to get those numbers up. And if you feel like you need some help with that, I'm happy to have a conversation, see if it makes sense to work together or not, and or to just give you some great ideas that you can move forward with yourself. So I really enjoyed talking with you today. I hope this has been really, really valuable for you. I hope you have a clear thought process about where you need to go with this. And again, I'm happy to sit down with you, and if you're still struggling with what to do next, I'm happy to talk. So thank you very much. If we don't have any more questions, it looks like I will sign off for today, and I look forward to talking with each of you personally. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful day.